This video I got to do right now was very hard for me. I had to muster up the courage to do this video. First, I just want to be transparency is like one of the most important things I think in life, and it helps you get through many things and when you acknowledge them. So I just want to mention a couple things. One, I still struggle with it, but I had a bad eating disorder as a result of wrestling and having to lose weight, and develop bulimia and all kinds of stuff. I think I've made a decent amount of progress with it. Two, I've had some physical abuse in my life that has done a little bit of its damage. It resulted in me getting in fights and various things like that later. Given that I was adopted, I felt sometimes like I wasn't wanted. Nothing my parents did. It's just I thought that I had to do all kinds of things to prove that I was worthy of being adopted. As you probably know, going through bankruptcy, two types of bankruptcy was not easy. Drinking and drugs, many years ago, it's been a decade or more, was a struggle. And a very rough divorce, which is really all my fault. So, I wanted to just mention these things because I've learned that if I can be honest with myself about certain things, I can improve things. And as a result of the damage I've done back in the day when these things occurred, I think I've had many casualties where I've hurt people accidentally, and I'm so extremely sorry for that. So all I want to do now is give out positive behavioral karma.
Continues to convulse from the coronavirus outbreak. 3 of the countries hardest hit by the coronavirus have each recorded their highest single-day death count.
Would you prefer a 14-day just sort of national shutdown?
We should really be overly aggressive and get criticized for overreacting.
Okay. Should more Americans be prepared to be hunkering down at their house?
Highest number of coronavirus cases.
Coronavirus-related deaths.
We got to be smart and aggressive.
And what the program actually is, so it functions as that, as Matt said, kids who need some more intensive support to not be permanently sent out of district, right? So the goal is to have these kids come to the OLC, do any, if we need an FBA or need an analog FA, and get the programming right and transition back into the district with our people, and then ultimately we could fade our support. So
The goal is to have a 4 to 6 month turnaround time.
And that's loose, I would say. It's all depending on the kid.
Yeah, and that sounds like amazing, right? Like that sounds like exactly what any school district want when no school can be open. So why are we struggling to get people in there?
Can I ask you, what's your instinct tell you about why the clinic can't get, you know what I mean? Like and it's totally subjective. And is it a private discussion, or is it?
I don't think it has to be private. My instincts would tell me that it's a very specific type of learner that we're able to accept in the clinic. So it really limits the amount of kids we can take.
I agree with that.
Okay, so.
Would it help to have a nurse?
Yes.
On what occasions were it non-nurse related? A potty training?
That came up a long time ago, but that was an issue.
And are you on the team yourself?
That decides if students come in or not? No.
That's got to
So we
change.
got it's the clinical team, and I'm not on that.
Well, you got to be on it now, from now on. I don't see why we wouldn't, right?
No, I think Matt brings a really good perspective to it. I think the nursing piece is definitely substantial for some of the kids we've been getting.
Okay.
Like Matt said, it's not the end all be all, but it's important.
I've heard though some didn't require a nurse historically, but their behaviors were too severe, so we turned them down. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And how is it, like, our company is built on severe behaviors?
I think we thought the same thing you did, because we made it the COVID compliance center, right? We had all the PPE and stuff, but it ended up really not working out that way.
I think a lot of parents were scrambling, and I think they didn't know really what their rights were or what services they were able to get for their kids during that time when they were home.
Yeah, nobody.
You know what I mean? So they kind of just said, my kid's home, we'll make the best of it. Whereas if I think they really put pressure on school districts, we probably would have had more students there while schools were closed. You know, I think another thing too, it's a new program. You know, and these district leaders, they're like creatures of habit, so they do what they're comfortable with. So, you know, I think over time, as schools start to have, you know, better and better experiences with our program and the word gets out there, I think it'll be a lot easier to get kids to come.
I think, yeah, like you said, when the kids go back to school, I think that'll be a big part to it as well.
Looking at the resources we have right now is challenging, because right now with being out, I'm only there 10 to 15 hours a week to provide that clinical oversight to the program as a whole. I know is coming in this week to observe a couple students for me.
I think an issue right now is we're not accepting certain students because there's only like what six rooms in there, right? And it's really hard to have an 18-year-old, you know, with younger kids running around. So if we can section off the room somehow to break them up into smaller rooms.
I mean, I'll be upfront. I think one of the bigger barriers is that clinical oversight without someone like there full time or someone like me there full time is a big part of it, because we do have BCs that are greener, that are more green right now, who do require that oversight. So, for example, has been there for a while, doesn't need much clinical oversight from me. Are both wonderful clinicians. They need a lot of oversight because they're greener BCs.
I think, Lynn, I think you should be on that program. I mean, you ran a neurobehavioral stabilization unit, you ran Seashore House. Yeah. The clinic team, admission team. Anyone not agree?
If I was in the clinic, but I was there, let's say 20 or 25 hours a week, that would give me the availability to provide a different level of clinical oversight. It's just the resources that are there right now is, I think, the biggest barrier.
Okay.
Like CA support. You think the CAs are getting the right support to be able to deal with those?
I think because I've requested additional support over the last couple of weeks for our more challenging students. Right. Your team has been exceptionally helpful in that. Jason popped in last week, was exceptionally helpful. Joe Kandorski popped in, was really helpful when we had a student in crisis. So that's definitely helped.
Because I feel like that's another piece too. When we do get these kids that are tougher, like the staff typically have struggled with them big time.
Yeah, well we have, and that is another piece that I've spoken about. And honestly, this could be a big conversation all in itself, Brett. I think the fact that we have green CAs for these very challenging cases is a barrier as well. Truthfully, I think, and I've had this conversation with Jason, I think the assessment process needs to change. I don't believe that every student that comes in needs an FA for every behavior. Right. I think that
it just seems like what you said about our value recently is not happening about obstacles.
Getting around the barriers, yeah.
I mean, I can tell you all I've done is problem solve since I got to the OLC, so yeah. You know. So
you've been taking actions towards problem solving, and yeah, okay. Well, I like all the candor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the OLC the last few weeks. Blood and sweat, literally, not tears.
I've heard that. I've heard. Thank you.
But no, I've been thankful for the support that we've gotten. But I'll always be upfront with you as to the things that I think they still need and the things that the program itself can be doing better.
Glass, do you have any weigh in on this?
I mean, I think a lot of what she's saying is accurate. I appreciate the directors of employee engagement helping out. I think, I'll tell you what, I'm just a little exhausted over the clinic, to be quite honest with you. Like, to the point where I don't even want to hear about it anymore. Just because I felt like it's always been excuses, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
No, yeah.
But it just seems
Thanks
like
for your candor on that.
For
radical candor, that's what we need.
Yeah.
For kids who, like, we don't have nurse to check them out, I get that. But if these kids were doing home instruction, they wouldn't have a nurse check them out anyway. So it would be like their mom or something.
Have we thought at all about making it more like a neurobehavioral stabilization type program for very severe behaviors with a nurse? I mean, I know there's a lot of things that have to occur, because I know Jess has looked at really difficult kids Progar's involvement, Haley, Von Thaden. I mean, like, this team, it can just, I mean, the history of severe behaviors is deep. Like, I just wonder if we want to consider that as an option too for the OLC.
Absolutely. I think, and that was going to be my what can we do better. We have so much genius and years of experience, like you just said. Being able to have Dr. Progar come in, identify the strengths of the program, identify areas of need is, I think, the next step to figuring out how can we take this to the next level, and what are other ways we can be using this site in addition to the transition program that is currently acting as right now. So I know I've been talking to Dr. Progar about setting aside some time to be able to come in and identify those needs and help us problem solve a little bit. The reality is that we also need to look at the resources we have and make sure that we're using them effectively and efficiently, right? So we had a student that was in crisis a couple weeks ago, and poor Jason and Matt, they both got texts from me saying, hey, like, I just need another body here until I'm able to put a plan in place for this student, until we're able to come up with a long-term solution.
Candia and his team have come through a lot for that,
as
right?
well. Yep,
Yeah.
Candia as well. Candia sent
Which
someone for me for a
all
couple
of this,
days.
all of this discussion is very. We keep going with it. It's like it'll help California with the growth of their clinic. I mean, it's just like the connection of hearing these things.
Yeah.
But keep going, sorry.
So Candia came in, Jason texted me that day, said I'll be there in 5 minutes, came and supported. But through that process of the student, being in crisis for those 5 days, I was able to look at what was happening and see we've got the same BCBAs attending to crisis every day, all day. We're not effectively utilizing our resources. So I went through and created a crisis response team plan. That way we have a rotating schedule of people who know when they're supposed to be responding to these crises. They're highly trained people, so we don't need 5 people in a room. Maybe we just need 2 or 3 people in the room. So I think all of that comes into some of the changes we need to make to be able to scale this and to be able to increase that census and work with the resources that we have.
That's awesome.
So we've already been utilizing the district directors, but what we spoke about yesterday, I think it's a great idea, is training our BCBAs that are actually in the field on what the program is, how to bring up the program as a potential option, and when to bring it up as a potential option. Because our school district director team, they all have really great relationships with the schools, but if you're not there working with the kid, you don't necessarily, you don't bring it up at a time where the timing's at the right time, right? Where the opportunity's not there, and honestly, for us as a district director team, I think when we constantly bring it up to schools, it does come across sometimes as being a little bit salesy.
So when I was working with you in Williamstown, and it was my first year at BDA, and me and you were just like walking through the hall, I think we were like about to leave, and there was just a kid tantruming, like on the floor, literally kicking and screaming. You walked over and talked to the teacher for a few minutes, and it distracted the teacher from the kid. Then you sat with the kid for not a long time. You didn't de-escalate the kid or anything like that, but then the very next week the school was asking us to come and do consultation with that kid.
There's no better way to create work. Rather than selling yourself, you're providing yourself as a solution to a problem. Yeah. You know what I mean?
The team right now consists of now you, new on it, and now you, Haley, I think.
I'm the second level, so after it gets past them, then I get the next people. So I've only had one student that's been referred to me since I came on.
And then I think, can I be, I guess I'll be on that team, just because I agree, I'm so sick of discussing it without solutions.
Yeah, and I think
Okay, so you will be on it, you'll be on it, I'll be on it.
And I said I'd be happy to be on that on the front end too, because I think I bring a unique perspective too of the systems piece and the clinical piece, and being pragmatic.
And then I'll ask to be there one day a week in person. So now we got to figure out how to find a solution oriented, and it sounds to me like Progar being involved, me and Jimmy, you on the front line, the top, right, is the way to go.
I will say a deterrent from attendance right now from school districts, I still believe, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, is without school being in full swing, the motivation for teachers is still lower to send kids
okay,
out to
but
places.
I thought it was kind of getting there.
We're getting there, but we're still operating at a fraction of what a typical school year operates at. And October was always the big month for us, right? We don't have that big month this year.
Did anyone make the recommendation other than me that you're on the team, ProGuard gets involved? Anyone make those recommendations that I just made, or?
You mean previously?
Previous.
I thought I remember hearing you say it, but
I know
the reason why is how I try to fade my presence and not be the one making that. That's all. Because that is solution oriented. You guys coming up with that solution.
So today we're sitting down with Dr. Pat Progar, one of the amazing clinicians that I've gotten to meet while at BDA here. But what I don't know about Dr. Pat is what were you doing before you got to BDA?
Well, I've held a few different jobs. I really got my start in the applied area at a place called Children's Seashore House, which merged with CHOP over in Philly back in the 90s. I worked on the biobehavioral unit, and it was an 18-bed inpatient unit for kids with special needs. And also they had to have one or more challenging behaviors. And so we dealt with probably some of the most aggressive, self-injurious type kids you could imagine. It was great training. It was a postdoc I did, and I stayed on for a couple more years after that. And then since then, I've worked at a couple different applied facilities. I was a director at Bancroft, where I ran the Lindens, which was sort of a replication site of the Kennedy Krieger neurobehavioral unit. Did that for a while, moved up to Caldwell College because I'd been a faculty member before Seashore House. And when I was up at Caldwell College, I was a tenured full professor. I became vice president for academic affairs up there. Started the first PhD program in ABA in the state of New Jersey, which was kind of neat.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. We started the master's. We had a certificate program when I started. Then we built in a master's and the first PhD program. We built an on-site autism center. It was really remarkable. I liked it. I liked all that. The vice president job was hard. It took me out of the clinical and teaching and research piece. And I was fortunate enough to get offered a position at a place called Princeton Child Development Institute by a good friend of mine, Greg McDuff. So I went down there, ran the adult program for a couple of years. So I've got experience now with adults. And then I ended up taking over as executive director of the school and adult program for about 3 years or so. And since then, I worked at a couple of other places, kind of the for-profit model, but I had not found a place as much fun as BDA. Brad and I go way back, and feels like I've been here for many years. I mean, it just it felt like a good fit from day one.
That's great to hear. And you know, it's so funny. So, Pat, I had no clue that you had such a storied background in ABA. I mean, you hear obviously like doctor level, you're like, oh, I know this guy's, he's got his stuff, you know, he knows his stuff. But I'm hearing that story, I'm like, geez, Pat, where haven't you worked? You're like, you've been a boss everywhere. That's awesome.
Of all things, I was at a Minnesota ABA conference. So it was like I think we were in St. Cloud, and I was out about 1 a.m. with Ray Miltenberger, drinking beers. And I was complaining about my faculty position. I said, I don't love it. It was like rural Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin, so, you know, but so even I'm like, I'm in the middle of farms. And it's like, I really want to do more applied stuff. And I said, you know, I don't know what to do. And I said, somebody told me just read the Iwata paper and, you know, start your clinic, you know, and I said, I didn't feel comfortable. And he's the one, Ray Miltenberger's one, he's like, I know Bud Mace in Philly. He's looking for somebody just like you. And he's like, I'll put you two in touch and, you know, and see what happens. And yeah, I wrote to Bud, and I remember his line to me eventually was, he's like, if you're stupid enough to move halfway across the country, give up a tenure track faculty position, take a pay cut and get the shit beaten out of you, I'm stupid enough to hire you.
I love that.
So that was my welcome to Philly.
The OLC I just got the word today, they came to our number, so we're going to be back open for business in the Operant Learning Center down in over here in Mount Laurel. 100 Birchfield now. It's a different type. Golaski will get into that. It's a different type. We're going to take only very, very severe behaviors. We're going to fortify it. It's going to be a different look. It's going to be a different clientele.
I had the pleasure of listening to Billy and Dr. Pat talk about Dr. Pat's background in neurostabilization units and PCDI and all these wonderful places and the skill sets that he has, that we can take a look at this clinic and build it out for the most severe learners in the world. And where everyone else throws their hands up and turns away, we can say like, hey, no, we can create this. This is what it's going to be. So is it going to be massive scale right from the get-go? No. We do have one potential client that Matt's working on, but it's going to be small scale. We're going to figure it out, but it's going to be a place where everyone else looks at these kids and says we can't help, and we're going to look at it and say we can find a way. So as Brett said, we're always 100% cool with complaints, 100% cool with problems, but I need to know the solution. And Dr. Pat is bringing a solution into play where typically you don't find. People have to go to Kennedy Krieger in like Maryland or something to get these kids taken care of. Maybe we can provide some supports up here that might not exactly replicate Kennedy Krieger, but might be something similar to that so the families don't have to have their kids so far away. Guys, listen, one thing BDA does better than anyone else is acting in the moment. Just say, hey, there's a problem, here's a solution, let's work at it. So it's not gonna be perfect, it's not. The reality is when we first do this, there's gonna be plenty of things we screw up on, but every single thing we'll learn from and move forward.